This is probably going to be pretty quick because I already talked about half the books that I read in my Asian Readathon wrap-up, so if you want to hear more about those books, you can check it out in wherever the link is. So yeah, I read 8 books this month, and generally I don't rate books, but I'm going to try so I can kind of get in the habit of it, just to see what happens, because I'm curious, and maybe it'll be something that I like, maybe it won't be, I'm not sure yet. The first book that I read this month was And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie. This is a super well-known Agatha Christie. It's a murder mystery, really cool premise. There's this nursery rhyme called 10 Little Soldier Boys, and somebody brings 10 people who've done bad things in their life onto an island and basically kills them off one by one. The story follows these 10 characters dying one by one, but also trying to figure out who the culprit is. And I bought this book probably 10 years ago, I want to say, and then I bought it in the phase where I used to like spoiling endings for myself, so I read the ending that explains what happened, and so I knew it was happening going into it, but I still enjoyed it. I think I definitely would have enjoyed it more if there was any feeling of suspense, but I knew what was going to happen the entire time, which was my fault, entirely my fault. But I still would recommend it. It's a classic in its genre, you hear everybody talk about it, and it's a good thing I finally got to it, because it's literally been a full decade, so I would rate this 3.5 stars. I think I would have given it probably 4 to 4.5 if I didn't know the ending, but I can't control the things that 10-year-old me did. Next, I'm going to just go through all the books from the Asian Readathon because I read them all back to back pretty much, and that was Men Explain Things to Me. I'd say this was a 3.5 to 4 star as well. It is nonfiction about misogyny and feminism in America, and I think Rebecca Solnit did an excellent job of piecing together anecdotes and evidence, although I wish I had more anecdotes in this one, but it was very good. And this was recommended to me by an Asian. That was the prompt that it filled. So I read Norwegian Wood by Haruki Murakami to fulfill the prompt of a book by an Asian author or featuring an Asian character that's different from you. It follows a Japanese man. He's a college student, and he's struggling with grief over the suicide of his best friend, but also going to college, and the whole cast of characters are people who are struggling with grief and mental health, and it's a fascinating look into grief, and it says so much without saying all that much. I would give this 4 stars, I think. Next is Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng. This is the book that everyone read for the Asian Readathon. It's a domestic drama, I guess, about people with complicated backstories and about woke white people that aren't actually very woke, and I liked it. I wish some characters had more consequences for their actions and for the things they did wrong. It felt like it ended a little bit too abruptly for me, but it's also a really short book, and she packed a lot into it, so I can't complain too much. I would give this 4 stars probably. Well, I'm not a picky reader. Okay, and then the last book I read at the Asian Readathon was The Sun and Her Flowers by Rupi Kaur. It's a poetry collection. I'd probably give this high 2, low 3 stars. I'll say 3 stars, average it out. Some lines hit really well, and some lines felt hokey and not my type of poetry maybe, and it's a quick read, so I don't regret reading it, but I also am curious to read Milk and Honey because I've heard it's better than The Sun and Her Flowers. There were some lines that hit home with me, so I wonder if Milk and Honey would have more of those. So maybe I will check it out. I'm not quite sure though. Maybe that style of poetry just isn't entirely for me. The next book I read was Beautiful Boy by David Sheff. Beautiful Boy is a memoir by a father of a son who's a meth addict. It follows the struggles he faces as he tries to raise his son, Nick Sheff, and Nick becomes addicted to meth and starts doing more and more drugs and goes into rehab many times, and it's a hard story to read. It's very sad, and addiction is just not an easy topic to talk about, but it's commendable that he wrote such a beautiful memoir about it that hopefully helps make addiction less taboo, because there's no way to treat it unless we talk about it. I think I would give this 3.5 stars. I feel weird rating this. I feel like my complaint with it is completely invalid, because I think my complaint is that sometimes it felt a little too repetitive, but that's the nature of addiction, and it's as though I'm complaining about being slightly bored when I read parts of it, when living it must have been absolute hell, and so I feel kind of crappy saying that, so I guess I said it though. So I still enjoyed it. Glad I read it. 3.75 stars. Wow, this is getting very granular. Maybe I should just rate them on a scale of 20 if I'm going to do it this divided up. Next book I read was Big Little Lies by Liane Moriarty. Big Little Lies follows a cast of mainly female characters, all mothers in a affluent neighborhood in Australia, and it's a domestic drama / kind of thriller because the first thing you find out is that somebody was murdered, and then it's all of the events leading up to that murder, and you don't know who died, you don't know what happened, and I think the structure of the story where it's a murder, it's a police investigation, but you have no idea what happened, and you know who you hope died, you know who you think might have died based on what you're hearing, and it's a very cool way to keep you on your toes guessing. I did not guess the ending at all. And I tried to watch the HBO miniseries, which was super popular with all these really famous actors, and I just couldn't quite get into it, and to be honest, I enjoyed the book way more. I think there were some plot lines in the TV show that pulled me out of the story a lot, and those didn't exist in the book. So I would recommend the book over the show, but I know a lot of people love the show, so maybe I'm alone in that opinion. I would give it 4.5 stars. I read it all in one sitting, it had me on the edge of my seat, and that's all you can really ask for in a thriller, so I'm happy with it. Also, reading books with an interesting cast of female characters is so much fun. The next book I read is The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. This one was super cool. I was intrigued just from the premise alone, then I immediately had to read it. The premise is that a man wakes up with no memories in this mansion, and he knows somebody's been murdered, but he doesn't know who did it or who's been murdered. And he's trying to figure it out and figure out why he's lost his memory, and then he goes to sleep and he wakes up the next day and he wakes up in the body of a different guest. And basically, he keeps waking up in the bodies of different guests trying to solve this murder and trying to figure out why he's stuck in this time loop and what's happening, and are there adversaries, is he alone, does he have a time limit, what's going on? And this book kind of has two suspense lines. There's the why is this character here suspense line, and there's the who committed the murder suspense line. And I think the who committed the murder suspense line was so much fun to read, and I loved it. And I didn't love the why am I here suspense line, but I think maybe I just had slightly too high of expectations, but the who committed the murder suspense line completely knocked me off my seat. Definitely enjoyed it. Would recommend. Especially in the middle when things are starting to build, I was zooming through it. It's 400 some pages, but it goes by so fast because you are desperate to know what's happening. So yeah, I'd give that 4 stars, I think. Wow, I am not a picky reader. Okay, that's okay. The last book I'm going to talk about, I'm not quite yet finished with, but I think I will be done by the end of May, because it's not quite the end of May yet, and that's Good Omens by Terry Pratchett and Neil Gaiman. I've heard so many good things about this book in my life, and it's supposed to be a funny book about the apocalypse, and that immediately draws my attention. It makes me very curious. And so I'm about this far into it so far, like 100 out of 400 pages about. To be honest, I like it, but I'm having difficulty getting into it because it's written a little bit archaically, and then it's also about England, and there's English slang that I don't quite understand. But it's funny, it's cool, it's interesting to see a demon and an angel interact and be friends and how that's explained, and I will probably have more thoughts about it later on, maybe in June, when I talk about it.